I am not about to suggest to you that there were no bad elements. Of course, we're dealing with those. But the critical mass, the great majority of the men and women at Eskom, competent, skilled, committed, and patriotic.
Imagine if load shedding never existed. Businesses thriving, students studying without interruptions, hospitals running smoothly. This could have been our reality, but instead, billions of rands meant for Eskom have vanished, stolen. And now, we are left in the dark, literally. Who is behind this? How did they get away with it? Today, we expose one of the biggest financial crimes in South Africa's history. South Africans suffer daily because of load shedding. Businesses close, students can't study, and crime increases. But the real crisis is not just failing power stations. It's theft on a massive scale. According to reports, Eskom lost 11 billion to corruption in irregular, fruitless, and wasteful expenditure. Employees colluded in fraudulent prepaid electricity sales, leading to electricity theft of 13.9 terawatt hours in 2023-24 financial year, which is more than the power lost to load shedding.
Now, the Hawks is currently probing more than 100 cases relating to alleged corruption and sabotage at Eskom. This was revealed by the Crime and Investigation boss, Godfrey Libya, in Parliament earlier. The Hawks, SIU and SAPS are briefing the Standing Committee on Public Accounts on several issues, including the controversial intelligence report commissioned by former Eskom Group CEO Andre de Ruyter.
The DPCI is currently investigating 105 matters that relate to Eskom. So this investigation are not necessarily emanating from the report that we are dealing with. We have already started the investigation way back.
Even more shocking, the Special Investigating Unit revealed that Eskom staff manipulated procurement processes to steal over 1 billion. Employees resigned before action could be taken against them, and illicit transactions were conducted after hours to avoid detection. So who took this money, and how was it done? Today we break it all down in simple terms.
Just walk us through the overview of this scandal. What are the findings from the SIU relating to this 1 billion rand investigation?
So the SIU, this is an article that was ran in the Sowetan Live, so I became aware of it. The SIU essentially found that workers in Eskom were basically working late at night and sort of manipulating the tender criteria to siphon off money, and this has now been investigated. So this is sort of a systemic issue, in my view, in Eskom. And personally, I'm kind of glad that there's some level of accountability being taken. Although they say one employer resigned preemptively, and I just have news for him. If you have committed fraud or anything of these allegations, then resignation does not exonerate you. You will still be charged, and you can still be locked up. If this ends up being prosecuted.
So we understand that the employees were able to manipulate procurement processes, particularly through low-value contracts. How did this actually work?
So this is something, I wrote an article about this almost last year with a man by the name of Saduma Stop. He was a quality engineer at Denel, and him and we're both engineers, and we talked about this. The issue is systemic, in my view. It's a systemic issue so I can't speak to all the particularities of this one because it will still come out. But the issue comes down to the tender criteria. Now, to explain to your audience, there's broadly speaking two ways of doing tenders for engineering equipment, things of that nature. And the first one is we do a competitive bidding. So you get 3 quotations, and then you get, say, the best of the 3, and obviously they have to score on some other criteria as well. And another one, which is you choose a technology partner. So I say I'm going to take a technology partner, and then I look at what the historical price of the contracts is, and I sort of negotiate to make sure that they're not ripping me off. Okay. And the trouble we've tried to alert to the public is that the government is overdoing competitive bidding. So if you have a highly specialized equipment, OEMs, things of that nature, you won't find 3 quotations all of the time. You might only find 1 or 2 people that can do it. Okay. So then what happens is intermediaries and middlemen are created along the way who say they are the actual suppliers. And this is how corruption happens. So in my view, it's a systemic issue that is a consequence. And the law I'm attacking is the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, not necessarily the BEE part, which a lot of people miss. It is the fact that it forces competitive bidding on everybody. Okay, and because of this, you have all these intermediaries. There's other things as well, such as mandatory localization laws in South Africa. Now that sounds great. Okay, we're going to manufacture ourselves, except some of these things are made in China and India, and there is no capacity in South Africa to do it. So you either have assemblies being set up, or you just have intermediaries saying they can do it. And this is the type of corruption that is hampered Eskom and frankly Transnet and all our SOEs.
The stolen billions, fraudulent prepaid electricity sales. Eskom admitted that staff colluded with illegal operators to sell fake prepaid electricity tokens. Instead of money going to Eskom, it went straight into criminal pockets. Example, the electricity stolen in 2023-2024 financial year, 13.9 terawatt hours, was more than what South African lost to loadshedding, 13.2 terawatt hours. Fake contracts and procurement fraud. Contracts were manipulated and split into smaller amounts to avoid detection. This allowed criminals inside Eskom to approve their own fraudulent deals. Example, over 1 billion was stolen through manipulated procurement deals.
The case relates to a contract awarded to ABB in 2015 for work at Kusile Power Station. The investigation arose as a result of ABB's voluntary disclosure of alleged collusion with certain Eskom officials to irregularly award ABB a 2.2 billion rand contract. The SIU says although Eskom officials involved in the wrongdoing have since left the power utility, they will be held to account. SIU says criminal investigation in the matter is ongoing.
The SIU, Eskom, and ABB agreed as follows. The SIU and Eskom have a duty to institute the review application to set aside this contract that we're investigating. As I indicated, it was clear from the evidence, and also ABB by themselves agreeing that it was acquired irregularly and on a corrupt basis.
Eskom says it will approach the National Treasury with a request for the continuation of the ABB contract. CEO and Director says removing ABB from Kusile will not make business sense. This as the technology used in the power station needs to be maintained and parts replaced by the company.
Coal and diesel scams. Corrupt officials inflated prices and bought low-quality coal, damaging power stations and increasing breakdowns. Example, in 2022, Eskom lost 14 billions to fake coal deals. Crime cartels inside Eskom. The SIU uncovered a network of employees and managers working together to steal from Eskom. Some staff members resigned before being caught, avoiding prosecution. Example, transactions were conducted after hours to bypass security checks. Political cover-ups and hidden agendas. Why wasn't this picked up earlier? Because powerful people are involved. Every scandal at Eskom benefits someone, whether it's corrupt politicians, executives, or businesses waiting to privatize power.
On the 4th of June last year, the then CEO informed the police and state security officials that members of your cabinet are involved in the corrupt cartels at Eskom. And these are serious allegations. On the 5th of July, he informed Minister Gordon and your NSA, Minister Mufamadi, about these ministers who are involved in corruption. Yet it now appears that you have done absolutely nothing in your cabinet to hold these individuals accountable. We cannot sit here while R1 billion a month is being looted from Eskom, and you're trying to go after the small fish when the big fish are sitting around your cabinet table. Mr. President, why have you not made any efforts to identify who those cabinet ministers are and hold them accountable?
You see, Minister Pravin Gordhan's office and a Minister for Electricity is at a point where they have nobody left to lie to. This is privatization. It's the beginning of privatization. Now, I have no dogmatic view in favor or against privatization. Privatized electricity markets work in Texas. They work to some extent across the European Union. They even have wholesale markets. But you have countries like Canada that doesn't really have a meaningful privatization. The world, I showed data to Parliament where I said the world is actually divided 50-50 on this issue. And then I want to point out something else which they don't like me mentioning, so I'm going to say all heretical words right now. The World Bank did a study comparing private and public utilities, and they found something incredible, which is public utilities under the right conditions actually have lower tariffs to end users than the private sector. So anyone that says to you the private sector is necessarily better or privatization are making those statements in contradiction to what is written in the peer-reviewed literature. This is privatization. The government is lying to us. I don't know how else to say it. So the public needs to be aware. Now, if this is official government policy, my view is this. Why don't we make it a campaign issue then for the election? Then the voters can decide for ourselves. Do we want more private sector participation? I agree there's a certain section of the population that wants that. And there's a certain sector that feels uncomfortable because they know these bankruptcies in the coal mining communities in Mpumalanga will hurt them. But what I'm really against is the government telling people, oh, we're going to unbundle, this isn't privatization, and your workers and everything, you have nothing to be concerned about. So they're effectively lying to their own voters. And what is unbundling? When you unbundle, you accept private sector participation. Now, theoretically, you can still have Eskom generation competing against the private sector. We already have IPPs, independent power providers in South Africa. Well, first of all, there's never been independent power providers. The biggest one is the president's brother-in-law, Patrice Motsepe. Okay. And they subcontractors for Eskom, actually. They sell electricity on behalf of Eskom. They were brought in by the president's other brother-in-law, Jeff Radebe, when he was Minister of Energy. Just to paint that background to the populations going on. So when they say public sector and privatization, they actually mean rent-seeking for people affiliated with the ruling party. The second point is Eskom generation currently has about 16 gigawatt, more or less, on unplanned capacity loss factor. So it means 1/3 of the coal fleet is broken down. Now, if you accept private sector participation under those conditions, you have to accept competition, and this will inevitably lead to bankruptcy of Eskom generation. Because no company, I mean, imagine a car company with 1/3 of all cars broken down. How is that company not going to go bankrupt and be written off for scrap by private investors? And let's be clear, the private investor is not a startup company or an entrepreneur of an idea. It's the president's family. Okay, they can go onto Google, they can type in and they can ask who is the biggest renewable investor in South Africa. Again, I'm not making a statement against renewables, but it's Patrice Motsepe. Okay, who is Patrice Motsepe? It's the president's brother-in-law. The second biggest one is the person who, I forgot the name now, who Jan Uber also recently worked for. He was the former chief operating officer of Eskom, and now he's into the private sector. I mean, what a shocker, right? Brian Damas was the CEO of Eskom. He works for Patrice Motsepe at the moment. We're seeing, I'm very blunt here, but we're seeing what happened towards the end of the Soviet Union, where middlemen or senior management within their nationalized utilities jumped to the private sector. And what this means when we say rent-seeking is we are preparing South Africa, I'm very blunt about this, to become a mafia state. Lebanon is another good example. They unbundled, they didn't carry through with it, and now the mafia is a bigger competitor to electricity to Lebanon. I have not seen any of these things mentioned in the mainstream media. So yes, it's rent-seeking. In the last, another example of rent-seeking, in the last bid, I think it was bid 5 of the renewable projects, 21 out of 25 of those deals, the BEE partner went to one person, or one company called H1 Holdings.
The truth must be told. South Africans who have been betrayed. Our electricity crisis is not an accident. It is a planned disaster. Money meant to fix Eskom is sitting in the pockets of corrupt leaders and criminals. The question is, will we allow this to continue? Or will we stand up and demand justice? What do you think? Should these corrupt officials and criminals be arrested? Comment below. Like, share, and subscribe to help us spread the truth. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Next video coming, the secret plan to privatize Eskom. Who wins and who loses? Stay tuned. Thank you for watching and take care.